Okay, so you clicked on this video because you want to purchase a new home and negotiate a better deal, right? Okay, so I'm not going to talk to you about how you can go to Realtor.ca or social media platforms and find yourself a nice home that you like, schedule the showing, but what we will focus on in this video is how to negotiate the better price. Because this is, I think, one of the main reasons why you should hire the real estate agent. And one of the main tips that I'm going to give you right away is that you should never rely on anything that the listing agent shares with you and promises, because they represent their own client who is the seller, and they act in their best interest, not yours. So keep that in mind going forward. My name is Marina.selby and I'm your local real estate agent, and I'm about to share with you some of the tips and strategies, negotiation strategies that I personally use in my day-to-day life that truly help me a lot in winning the deals and negotiate better price and conditions for my clients. Okay, so negotiations is a very, very important part of the whole real estate purchase process. And if it's done right, you can get yourself a very good deal. And needless to say that bad negotiation strategy or a no negotiation strategy at all can really cause you a deal. So number one thing that I want you to focus on is that negotiations always mean communication and collaboration with the other side. And for more effective negotiation, you need to build a rapport and trust with the opposite side to learn more about, first of all, what drives them. Find out any underlying interests that they may have in order to identify potential trade-offs and use them for negotiations. I know it's easier said than done, but good negotiations always involve your ability to listen and listen carefully. Remember how they always say that we have 2 ears and only 1 mouth? So that means that you have to be extra careful listening to others rather than talk a lot, because you can hear a lot of things that will eventually help you in negotiations later on. Negotiations is not always going in aggressive, but sometimes it really pays off to be extra charming and establishing that friendly atmosphere and trusted relationship. That always pays off. Most importantly, keeping your emotions in check during negotiations and relying on facts and statistics, because numbers don't lie. Sometimes negotiations may last days, sometimes even weeks, going back and forth. And in some cases, you may not be able to even meet that price that you want to be at. So if you have a tight budget and you know your absolute max, the certain strategy that is called the highest and best offer may be a great solution, because this will give you time, that will save you time tremendously and will show the sellers what is your absolute top budget. And it's either you are able to get the property for the amount you want to pay, or you just simply move on to the next deal if the sellers are expecting more or sometimes are unreasonable in their expectations. Another great tip is to have a written offer always. I know many agents feel that it may be a huge waste of their time if the offer is not going to be accepted, but there is something psychological about having a written offer in front of the seller with the dates, with the numbers and the conditions, if any, because it's a written offer with a certain irrevocable time, meaning that the buyer cannot walk away from this offer and it is set in stone until irrevocable expires. They have committed to the purchase. And numerous times I saw how it pushes sellers to actually start the negotiations, which is great. So this is a great tip, I think, to keep in mind. And having said that, this is super important to have a great communication with the seller's representatives and establish this connection we spoke about earlier. Another tip, of course, is gathering all the necessary data to ensure you're fully prepared for the negotiations. We are looking at things like how long the property has been in the market, was the listing terminated in the past, when was it purchased, and what was the purchase price, what are the other properties that were recently sold in the area, how comparable they are to this particular home, and so on, so on. I'm going to say that again and again, but the knowledge is power. And when you do know the statistics and everything about the house in mind, it gives you a great upper hand in negotiations. You have no idea how many times I saw how the other buyer's agents are just shooting in the dark, or even the seller's agent is not as prepared and don't know all the details about their own listing. That happens. And when you come in prepared and able to properly explain your position and how you came up with the numbers, it makes you stand out and gains you respect, and at some point even intimidates the other side, especially if the other representatives are not as prepared as you are. So yeah, knowledge is truly a power in negotiations. Many times the ability to negotiate a better price and a better deal truly depends on how you will position yourself as a buyer. Negotiations come in all sorts of different forms, but we always have to play according to your particular situation. So I'll give you an example. I had a buyer client where they had a very certain, very tight budget, and in that dynamic market that we had, they had absolutely no chance in winning. So we came across that perfect house for them where everything just worked. You know how that usually is. And after speaking with the seller's representative and finding out a lot of information about who the sellers were, their motivation, and learning what they were looking for in a buyer, because many do, believe it or not, I've created a very strong offer letter for them that explained who the buyers were, their vision, why they were buying this particular home, what they like about this. We explained the mortgage situation, the cash being offered, attached all the necessary documentation to support that. I've included all the recent transactions in the neighborhood and made a very strong case about why we're offering this particular amount for this home. So basically you give all the ammunition that the seller's agent would need to persuade their client to accept the offer. The sellers actually really loved the fact that their forever home was being sold to another growing family that would take care and continue the lifestyle that they have created in this home. And they chose my buyers to give them a chance to come in with their best offer prior to responding to other buyers. So we got that place. So if it all comes down to show how important it is to have a proper representation for you as a buyer, and at the same time, if you feel that you can represent yourself just as easily, by all means go for it, but just keep in mind a few other points that I'm going to mention in a bit. Sometimes there are situations where the purchase of the property is purely number driven, such as for investors, right? So when I work with investors, there are absolutely other strategies involved where you do have a certain budget to work with, and if it's outside of that budget, the cash flow will not work, or the amount of the labor and the material cost will not pay off at the resale. Another problem we face when working with investors is the fact that many sellers, especially those that care a lot about who will live in their home after, makes it more difficult to win the property over the other offers from, say, the growing family and so on. So there are other strategies involved in helping you secure those homes. Overall, knowing how to speak and deal with people should be an absolute must in any kind of negotiations. Being mindful of people's feelings and emotions, understanding who they are and where they're coming from, and not being so aggressive is in your communication style, sort of speak. Every seller wants to sell high and every buyer wants to buy low, and sometimes negotiations can get heated, and your job is to keep your cool at all times and not get dragged into the argument, because once that happens, you lost. Hopefully these tips were helpful, and if you need any other information or help with anything real estate related, just reach out. My contact information is always under the video. And please don't forget to subscribe to my channel, like this video, share it with someone who you think may benefit if you find this helpful. And I'll see you in my next video.